The words still echo in my ears, sharp as broken glass. After the wedding beneath chandeliers worth more than I had made in my first 5 years of working, Taylor leaned close with a smile, polished for the cameras, and whispered, "Half of your $1 million estate is mine. You are nothing without me." I felt the weight of the folder in my hands. Inside were the documents no one else seemed to notice. A deed, a will, a few envelopes with names stamped across the front. All of it proof of how hard I had fought to build a life of my own. For a moment, my body froze. I could hear laughter ringing across the ballroom glasses, clinking the sound of a band striking up another tune. Everyone else lived in that moment of celebration. I lived in the silence that follows humiliation. I told myself to breathe. My eyes moved from the crystal chandeliers to the polished dance floor where couples spun dresses flaring like sails. Not one person looked my way. Not one hand reached for mine. That is how betrayal feels invisible in a room full of people. And still I kept my smile fixed. Pretend, endure. Hold it down until the time is right. That is what I whispered to myself as Taylor moved on chatting with guests as if nothing had been said. I stayed near the table, my fingers pressed against that folder, as if it were the last anchor keeping me upright. Inside in black and white was the story they thought I had forgotten. The deeds to the condo I had bought with a decade of saving. The notarized stamp from the lawyer who handled my aunt's small inheritance. The quiet reminders that I was not nothing. I had built this, alone. But humiliation is a seed. It does not die quickly. I felt it push through my chest, reminding me of every late night I had worked, every cup of cheap coffee that had kept me awake every hour. I had sacrificed so that one day I would not need to beg anyone for help. And now here I was told to my face that half of it belonged to someone else simply because I had trusted love. I wanted to shout. I wanted to turn the music off and tell every guest exactly what kind of person Taylor had become. But timing matters. Revenge is like money in the bank. You wait until the interest compounds before you withdraw. So I held my tongue. I let them believe I was stunned into silence. I let them think their words had broken me. That smile stayed on my face, even as my insides burned. Across the room, I saw Taylor raise a glass. Cameras flashed. For them, this was victory. For me, it was the beginning of something else. Because here's what they did not know. I had been watching long before the wedding. I had read the messages, seen the photographs, traced the flight logs. When someone tells you that you are blocked for 5 days, you either swallow it whole or you start digging. I had chosen the latter. And in that folder resting on my lap, I carried the kind of evidence that could bring down an empire. Still that night, I said nothing. I only looked around the hall and thought to myself, you are all clapping for the wrong person. Wait until you see what is coming. So before I take you further, let me ask you something. Families and money, where do you stand? Tell me where you are watching from, and do not forget to subscribe. We need to talk, because what happened next is something I will never forget. I suppose I should tell you who I am before the storm gets worse. My name is Alex, 30 years old, a financial manager in a mid-sized firm downtown. I am not rich by the standards of the city's glittering elite, but I am not poor either. Over the years, I carved out a steady life. I saved. I invested wisely. I bought a condominium with my own money, no cosigner, no handouts. Every square foot of it was a monument to 10 years of restraint. Taylor came into my life 3 years ago. At first, I thought I had found the kind of love that poets describe. Taylor was bright, charming, always at the center of every room. Friends followed like shadows. Nights were full of rooftop bars, weekend trips, champagne selfies. I did not fit the mold. I was the one who preferred spreadsheets and quiet cafes. Still, Taylor said I brought balance, that I was the calm anchor to the storm. Over time, I began to see what that storm really was. Taylor's friends, people who lived for spectacle, laughed at me often. They called me the accountant as if stability were a punchline. They drank on my balcony, spilling red wine onto rugs I had worked months to afford. They whispered about the vacations they could squeeze from Taylor's boring partner with a safe salary. It did not matter much, I told myself. I had chosen Taylor, not the entourage. I tried to see the best to believe that when the crowd dispersed, there was something genuine left between us. Then came the trip. 5 days before the wedding, Taylor announced there would be a bachelorette escape. Las Vegas, the city of neon sins. I asked calmly for details, flight number, hotel reservation, just in case of emergencies. Taylor's eyes hardened. You do not need to know that. It is my time. The whole point is to get away from everything, including you. I remember standing still, hearing the laughter from the living room where the friends waited. I thought I had misheard, but no, Taylor repeated it sharper this time. It is a girls' trip. You are blocked until I get home. Blocked. Not just a request for privacy, but a declaration. 5 days of silence imposed like punishment. I am not a fool. In my profession, people hide things behind polished smiles. I read numbers the way others read novels. I know when balance sheets lie, when a deal is rotten underneath the ink. And suddenly I realized my personal life was not exempt from those same calculations. That night I watched Taylor pack sequin dresses and heels. I offered no argument. I only said, "Enjoy yourself." A flicker of confusion crossed Taylor's face. They had expected anger. They wanted a fight to justify the wall they were building. My calm left them unsettled. The next morning I drove Taylor to the airport. They kissed my cheek, told me not to miss them too much. I smiled because missing was not on my schedule. Investigation was. Here is something people often misunderstand. Betrayal is loud, but the preparation for revenge is quiet. I went to my office. I began with the simplest tool I had: public records. Taylor's friend posted a photograph on social media. That same morning, the four of them outside a suburban house, luggage piled high. In the background was a luxury SUV. The license plate, though blurred in the corner, was still readable. A small detail, but details are what I live on. A search led me to the owner, an executive, a senior partner at a large investment firm, married, children. And yet his car was parked outside, waiting to ferry Taylor and friends to an undisclosed destination. Taylor had told me they were flying budget. I checked the passenger lists of commercial flights, no record, but there was a private jet registered under that same firm scheduled to leave for Las Vegas that very morning. Piece by piece, the puzzle began to form. The trip was not what it seemed, and the more they tried to block me, the clearer their movements became. Still, I said nothing. I sent no messages. I let them believe their silence was working. They celebrated in neon clubs, posed with cocktails by pools, crafted captions to sell the illusion of independence. And every post, every careless video from a friend's phone, gave me more data than they realized. Beneath my calm exterior, a ledger was forming. One column for what they had taken from me, trust, time, dignity. Another column for what I would reclaim. I sat alone in my condo at night, scrolling through photographs, reading between the lines, and each time I told myself the same thing. They believe this is their triumph. They will never see the bill until I deliver it myself. But what they did not know was, I had already begun collecting interest. By the third night of that so-called bachelorette escape, I no longer felt like a partner left behind. I felt like a detective revisiting an old case, except this time the suspect was the one who used to share my bed. It began with something simple, an unlocked laptop. Before Taylor left, I noticed the machine on the dining table, half closed, the light still glowing. I had never pried into private files before. I believed trust was a currency worth guarding. But when someone declares you blocked for 5 days, the rules shift. I lifted the lid and stared at the inbox. Messages from airlines, receipts from boutiques, an entire digital trail Taylor must have assumed would never be seen. I copied what I needed onto a flash drive and tucked it inside that same folder I had carried to the wedding. Paper and digital both layered together like evidence in a courtroom. The receipts told a story. Not budget flights, not shared hotel rooms. Instead, there were transfers for luxury suites, rooftop access, and one particular note from a high-end casino, complimentary services billed to the investment firm I had already traced. It was confirmation, but I needed more. Betrayal is slippery. People will always argue that what you saw is not what you think. So I looked for voices that did not belong to Taylor. One of the friends, careless as ever, had a social media profile set to public. She posted constantly, a blurred hand with a wedding band in the corner of a photo. A reflection in a mirrored elevator door, an older man standing beside them. The comments were worse: inside jokes about our sponsor, jokes about how somebody is paying for this ride. I archived every image, every caption. Screenshots stacked like playing cards, one on top of the other. Still, I wanted the pattern to be airtight, so I turned to something most people forget: flight manifests. Private jets do not list passenger names openly, but they do file flight plans. I found records showing the same aircraft leaving our city and returning 5 days later. Its registered owner matched the license plate I had run before. To me, that was as loud as any confession. They had traded honesty for a chartered jet and the thrill of being untouchable. But the most damning piece arrived by accident. A stray email left unsent in Taylor's drafts folder. It was short, only one line typed at 2 in the morning. Half of Alex's estate is practically mine already. Let me handle the rest. The words blurred in front of my eyes, but I copied them anyway. That was the moment humiliation hardened into something sharper. It was not just a trip. It was a calculation, a blueprint for ownership, as if my years of saving and sacrifice could be signed away with a wedding vow. I told no one. I returned the laptop exactly as it had been. Outwardly, I was the calm partner waiting for Taylor's return. Inwardly, I was cataloging, numbering each piece of the puzzle. When Taylor came home, the act was flawless. Smiles, gifts, stories about girls' nights, and sleeping until noon. I nodded, I listened, I carried bags inside. I did not ask a single question. Silence, I knew, was more frightening than suspicion. And so we moved toward the wedding day. Taylor planned the event like a coronation, all gold trim and crystal. Family members from both sides filled the pews. Friends rehearsed their toasts, and I sat quietly, folder in hand, waiting. Because here is the truth I had learned long ago: deception leaves fingerprints, and I had collected enough to cover every surface of that ballroom. They thought the game was over, that I had been outmaneuvered, but I was only balancing the ledger line by line. What they did not know was the real ceremony had yet to begin. The morning of the wedding arrived with the kind of quiet that always unsettled me. Sunlight spilled across the hotel suite where I dressed alone. My suit hung pressed and ready, the tie knotted with care. Outside, the city was alive with honking horns and early chatter, but in that room I felt an odd calm, as though I had already lived this day once before. The ceremony was lavish beyond reason. Chandeliers dripped with crystals, tall arrangements of white lilies framed the aisle, and a quartet played songs most guests pretended to recognize. Taylor thrived in that spotlight, moving from table to table with practiced charm, every gesture rehearsed for cameras. Guests whispered about the cost. Some said nearly $2 million had been spent on the venue, the food, the attire. I listened silent, the folder never leaving my hand. When the vows were spoken, Taylor's voice trembled just enough to appear sincere. Mine was steady. I knew the truth behind the curtain, and it steadied me like steel. But the real moment came after. Dinner had been served, wine poured, laughter rising like smoke in the grand hall. Taylor's parents called for attention. A hush fell over the room. A notary appeared at their side, carrying papers in a slim leather case. Taylor turned to me, smile sharp enough to cut. "It is time," the voice carried, amplified by the microphone, "for us to sign the agreement." A ripple of murmurs spread. Guests leaned in eager. And then, as though it were a toast, Taylor delivered the blow. "Half of your $2 million in savings belongs to me now. Sign the prenup so the family can be sure." The words hung in the air. Someone chuckled nervously. Others looked down at their plates, unsure whether to applaud or pity. I stood there, humiliation flooding my chest. My name, my life, my money, all reduced to a line in a contract waved before a crowd. Betrayal had never been so public. Taylor pressed again, louder. "Do not hesitate. You would be nothing without me." I watched the faces around me. Family members shifting uncomfortably, colleagues pretending not to stare, friends covering their mouths to whisper. The sting was sharp, but sharper still was the certainty that I was not the one on trial here. They were. So I did not shout. I did not storm out. Instead, I lifted my glass, let the light catch the liquid inside, and smiled. Of course, I said softly, loud enough only for Taylor to hear. Confusion flickered across those confident eyes. They had expected outrage, perhaps even surrender. They were not ready for calm. Because what none of them knew was that I had already signed my own set of documents, filed with lawyers, sealed with stamps, recorded in systems that could not be erased with a single pen stroke. And inside my folder were not just deeds and wills, but photographs, emails, and drafts written in the heat of careless nights. The humiliation I endured that evening was the mask I chose to wear. Revenge, after all, tastes sweeter when the world least expects it. As the music rose again and guests returned to their plates, I leaned back in my chair, the folder resting against my lap, like a weapon waiting to be unsheathed. This part matters. The air inside the ballroom had grown heavy. Perfume and wine mixed with the low hum of conversation, the kind of sound that usually covers secrets. But on that night, no noise could muffle what I was about to do. The band was between songs, waiting for the cue to strike up another round. The photographer hovered near the stage camera, poised. Taylor was basking in the glow of attention. A toast raised the crowd, clapping along. I rose slowly from my chair, folder in hand, and crossed to the center. At first, no one noticed. Why would they? Weddings are not meant for the quiet one. But then I cleared my throat, the microphone already at my lips. Before we continue with the dancing, I said, voice calm, I would like to share something. The light seemed to shift, every head turning toward me. Taylor froze mid-toast. I opened the folder. Papers spilled across the table beside me, printouts of emails, receipts with company logos, screen captures of social media posts. But the real blow came from the projector I had arranged with the venue staff days earlier. One click of a remote in my pocket and the wall behind us lit up. The first image, Taylor and friends stepping off a private jet, champagne flutes raised. Laughter erupted in the room, not the warm kind, but sharp and nervous. The caption from that night's post hovered beside it. Our sponsor knows how to treat us right. Taylor's smile faltered. What are you doing? The voice hissed, too late. Next came a copy of the draft email written at 2 a.m. Half of Alex's estate is practically mine already. Let me handle the rest. Gasps rippled across the crowd. Even Taylor's parents shifted in their seats, color draining from their faces. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The evidence spoke louder than any outburst. I explained nothing, offered no commentary, only let the images and words roll one after the other. Receipts from casinos billed to a corporation. Hotel bookings under aliases. Photographs where wedding rings glinted on hands that were not mine. People began to murmur, some covering their mouths, others shaking their heads. Phones appeared, recording every second. The whispers of $2 million, private jets, betrayal. They would not stay in that ballroom. They would leak into the digital bloodstream before midnight. Taylor tried to step forward to snatch the microphone, but I held up a hand. You said I was nothing without you, I told them, steady and low. But the truth is, you were never anything without me, and now everyone knows it. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then scattered applause, awkward, uncertain, but real. Some guests stood, others simply stared. Taylor's face collapsed under the weight of exposure. The arrogance drained away, leaving only shock. I gathered the folder, closed it carefully, and stepped down from the stage. No further words, no need. I walked past the tables, past the stunned relatives and the whispering friends, and out into the cool night air. The music inside did not resume. For once, the party had ended before the lights went out. That was the moment humiliation turned to triumph. Revenge had left my lips, not in anger, but in proof. And proof, when delivered in public, carries a weight no denial can lift. I did not have to say a word after leaving that hall. The world took over for me. By the time I reached the car, my phone buzzed with notifications. Friends I had not spoken to in years were sending screenshots. The video was already online. A guest had uploaded the entire scene, the projector flickering Taylor's face, crumbling my voice, carrying calmly across the microphone. Within an hour, hashtags multiplied like wildfire. $1 million wedding gone wrong. Jet bride exposed. The $2 million betrayal. Strangers dissected every image, every line of text, every shaky laugh from the guests in the background. I sat in silence, watching it unfold. My name was suddenly on every platform, but not as the victim they called me, the one who turned the tables. Some said I had staged it like a courtroom drama. Others called it the cleanest revenge they had ever seen. Taylor's friends once, so proud of their glittering posts, scrambled to delete accounts. It was too late. Screenshots lived forever. News outlets picked up the story before dawn, headlines gleaming with scandal. Socialite bride accused of double life, with corporate executive. Wedding guest captures viral revenge speech. Taylor's family, once so proud of their connections, were dragged into the storm. Their company's name appeared beside every article. Reporters camped outside their offices, microphones waving questions sharp. Did you know about the private jet? Were you aware of the secret accounts? The silence that followed was as damning as any answer. I returned to my condo and locked the door. Inside, the quiet was thick. On the table lay the folder, still heavy with papers, though its contents had already spilled into the public square. I poured myself a glass of water, hands steady for the first time in weeks. Humiliation had been public, yes, but now so was truth, and truth once revealed cannot be folded back into secrecy. The messages kept pouring in, some from distant cousins, others from colleagues who had always underestimated me. Many began with the same line, "I had no idea." I replied to none. Let them wonder. Let them debate whether I had planned it for weeks or months. The reality did not matter. Perception was enough. Taylor, meanwhile, vanished. No posts, no statements, just silence. But the internet does not forgive silence. Each hour without explanation fed speculation. Some insisted Taylor had fled to another state. Others claimed divorce papers were already filed. None of it mattered. The reputation was gone, shredded under the weight of a viral clip. Revenge does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers, carried by a million voices online, until it becomes undeniable. I leaned back, the glow of the screen lighting the room, and thought to myself I had not only balanced the ledger, I had tipped it. And yet there was more. Because viral fame fades, but consequences at home, in family and finances, they cut deeper and last longer. I will tell you about that part next. Scandal burns bright, but the ashes it leaves behind choke the ones who fed the fire. By the end of that week, Taylor's family was crumbling under the weight of exposure. Their once polished company, a mid-sized investment firm that prided itself on stability, became the subject of headlines about corruption, misuse of funds, and hidden expenses. Clients pulled accounts. Partners demanded answers. Share prices slipped, and whispers of lawsuits filled the air. At the center of it stood Taylor, once the jewel in their crown. No longer a bride adorned with pearls, but a cautionary tale replayed on every late-night talk show. The clip of my calm voice, the line, "You said I was nothing without you, but now everyone knows the truth," had been replayed so many times it was practically branded into public memory. Friends vanished. The same crowd that once spilled wine across my carpets now blocked Taylor's number. No one wanted to be linked to a scandal that smelled of fraud and betrayal. Even family grew quiet. Invitations to gatherings evaporated, replaced by curt messages. "It's better if you don't come." Meanwhile, I moved in silence. While the internet debated whether I was a genius or simply lucky, I was busy transferring every asset I owned into a trust fund sealed with ironclad terms. My condo, my savings, even the modest inheritance I had received years before all shifted under legal protection. If anyone thought to come after me again, they would find nothing but walls they could not climb. I walked into work one morning, suit-pressed folder finally empty. My boss shook my hand in front of the team. "Saw the video," he said quietly. "You handled yourself with more composure than most people would under that kind of pressure." I nodded, offered a small smile, and said nothing more. Sometimes silence earns more respect than explanations. But revenge, even executed cleanly, does not erase betrayal. Nights were still heavy. I lay awake, replaying words whispered at the wedding, remembering how Taylor had looked me in the eye and claimed half of everything I had built. Betrayal leaves a bruise, and bruises ache long after the skin appears healed. Then came the letter. Delivered in an envelope handwriting I recognized instantly. Taylor's. Inside was a single page begging forgiveness. Promises that it had all been a mistake, that the trip had meant nothing, that love was still real. The final line read, "Please meet me. We can still fix this." I read it once, twice. Then I folded it back into the envelope and placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk. I did not reply. Because the truth is, some debts cannot be repaid. Some betrayals cannot be undone. Taylor had chosen greed over love, arrogance over honesty, calculation over partnership. My answer had already been given in front of hundreds of witnesses. But there is one more part of this story you should know. Something I did with the house. Something I will tell you soon. The house stood silent when I returned to it weeks later. My condo, the place I had worked 10 years to afford, felt different after everything. The walls seemed taller, the rooms emptier, but not in a sad way. More like they were breathing again, relieved to be free from the weight of lies. I walked through each space with deliberate steps. The dining table where Taylor's friends once laughed at my thrift, spilling drinks as if the place were theirs. The bedroom where promises had been made, then broken. The balcony where I had stood alone while parties raged inside. Each corner carried memories, but none of them had power over me anymore. I made a decision. I would not let betrayal be the final imprint on this home. I called my lawyer and arranged for the property to be folded fully into the trust I had built. Then I added one final clause upon my death. The house would be donated to a local charity for children aging out of foster care, a place where they could live as they found their footing in the world. It felt right. I had been told I was nothing without someone else. Now my house would prove that even in absence, I could give someone everything. The scandal that destroyed Taylor's reputation faded from the headlines over time, as scandals always do. A newer story took its place, then another, then another. But the internet does not forget. Clips still circulate, lessons still repeated in hushed tones at parties. Do not lie to the one who knows where the receipts are kept. As for me, I live quietly. I still work in finance, still wake early, and press my suits. I spend evenings with books, not battles. Peace, after all, is the best revenge once the truth has been told. Every so often, someone recognizes me on the street, their eyes widening as they whisper, "You're the one from the wedding video." I smile politely and keep walking. Let them remember me however they like. I remember myself as someone who refused to be erased. And that is where my story ends, at least the part I am willing to share. What happened behind closed doors, the nights of doubt, the letters unanswered, those belong to me alone. But the lesson, I think, belongs to anyone who has ever been told they were nothing. Sometimes the only answer is to prove quietly and completely that you were always something on your own. So now I ask you, if you think I made the right move, comment "right." And if you believe you would have handled it differently, share your idea below. Because in the end, family and money are never just numbers, they are stories, and mine is finished.